and an Asia version coming up, if I'm not mistaken, next week, same time, same time, same day. Let's say same day, that's better. With Jitesh, I saw Jitesh as well as part of this group, so he's leading that effort, and I'm part of the US base together with Donna and Eric Trant, which is an MVP on Windows 365 as well. So if you're interested or have colleagues or different departments sitting in the US or in Asia, then perhaps you are interested in joining that group as well. To have a more localized group that is easier with your time zone to collaborate with. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I really would like to give you sort of a insight, deep dive into the roadmap. What have we shipped recently? What's coming next? And go a little bit maybe beyond, hey, why did we do that? Or if you have a question, hey, what's coming next, or things that are related or something like that, let me know. Just speak up or put it in a chat, and I'm happy to answer them. The real power of this meetups is really to have an informal kind of group session where we can discuss things and dive deeper into some topics. So let's show you the list of features we recently shipped. So just to give you sort of a level set on where we are today. And of course, there are more features, but these are more the highlights that we shipped into our SaaS service, Windows 365. And for the folks that are not familiar with what Windows 365 exactly is, so the best way to compare Windows 365 with another solution in market is to think about SaaS, software as a service. Just like applications can move to SaaS, which is easier, and the provider on the background manages most of the components for the customer. That's kind of the same thing with Windows 365. We host the virtual machines and everything on the background that you normally do yourself on Azure. We host it for the customers. You're still in control of creating and provisioning, as well as maintaining kind of the applications on top, and do the policy configuration, conditional access, compliancy settings, all those things via MEM. That's all still the same, but the components on the platform side, like the VM and the provisioning of that, and the automation and the correlation between VNets and everything around, is something we do on behalf of a customer about the automation we created. And you can still do parts yourself. If you go hybrid, for example, you can still bring in your own Kerberos domain and such. But with Azure AD Join support, which I'm touching in just a bit, you can go full cloud with a hosted VNet. So no need for on-prem Active Directory or an Azure subscription or VNet or whatsoever. But that doesn't mean we don't support it with Azure AD Join. You can as well bring in a VNet and an express route side-to-side VPN. So we really meet where the customer is today, or where the customer wants to be tomorrow, with the kind of configuration sets and domain support that we have today in the platform. So that brings me to the list of features. So first of all, we shipped a new client, web client experience for users in our portal, which will ship pretty soon in GA. It still is in a public preview. So if you go to the windows365.microsoft.com portal and you log on with your credentials, you see in the right corner What's New button. And if you click on that, you can activate the preview, and soon that will be just the default experience. And that new experience gives you faster load time, higher performance, local resource settings and changes of redirection settings inside that session in the right corner, and all kinds of accessibility improvements like keyboard layout and such, all possible to change during logon or while you're in the session. And you can bookmark Cloud PCs in there as well, all to improve that end-user experience, as well as to create a unique branding experience for Windows 365. So we have our own domain, and if you're in that website, you see as well the specs and everything you have as part of your Windows 365 Cloud PC environment, which is way easier for an end user to understand what's going on. And you can do some self-service activities there as well, like reboot the Cloud PC, rename, restore, resize in the future as well. Troubleshooting and all those things are possible to do on behalf of the Cloud PC as a user themselves. And you can, as an IT admin, control that as well a little bit, what you want to show for an end user or not. So all kinds of flexibility from the web client. And we will soon as well ship a Windows client, but that's something for the next line. So just already shared native Azure AD Join is now supported in public preview. a long-awaited feature. I think it was number one for like the moment we shipped. The first thing customers asked was, "Hey, why did you ship with hybrid Azure AD?" And the main reason for that was it was not available in GA yet on the Azure platform. So we had to wait for that shipment to happen to do it in our product. So that's what you see more and more. Like if Azure ships something in GA, then we follow almost immediately with the same feature as well in our platform. So that's now supported in GA, and next month we will go GA with Azure AD Join as well. So with that, you no longer need a domain controller Azure subscription, and you can decide yourself if you want to host a VNet as well in Azure. So you can go full native cloud if you want to. I think one of the MVPs on the MEM side posted something on Twitter. I was watching a movie with my wife on the couch, and I was just provisioning a cloud PC in just a matter of like 5 to 10 minutes, going over the setup. And that's how easy it can be with this new Azure AD Join support with hosted network as a configuration item. But you can go on-prem as well with ExpressRoute and side-to-side if you have a backend and everything that is required to connect to your application servers and such. That's all supported too. So as I said, we meet where the customer is today and tomorrow with that setup. And hybrid Azure AD is supported as well. And we don't have plans to remove that. But of course, Azure AD Join is where customers want to be. And of course, that's where we focus most of our configuration on. But just to follow up on that, in that provisioning flow configuration for the Windows 365 Enterprise product, there's as well a new localized experience. So what you can do now is change the language inside the Cloud PC, just in a matter of just flipping a switch and then put like German or Dutch or Danish or any other language in there. And then the Cloud PC will provision with that language back. So I'm not sure if some of the folks are familiar with like how VDI works and how you create an image and how you sysprep that and such. Very complex or time consuming. And with this feature, you can just like do it during the provisioning flow and then you're done. And you can create different provisioning policies and connect that to an Azure AD group to sort of create groups, provisioning policies per region. So you make it very easy for you to just put a user in an Azure AD group, and then that Cloud PC automatically provisions and with the same language as well as the other configurations that you do in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So Windows 11 support, probably very familiar already. On the 5th of October, we shipped Windows 11 support as part of Windows 365. So what does that mean? All the hardware flow requirements, TPM and UEFI and secure boot capabilities are part of Windows 365. So you can use Windows 11 on any device, even though that device is not compliant for Windows 11. So you can even use Linux as an endpoint and then connect to Windows 365 with Windows 11 being used as part of a Cloud PC. We have new images for that, so new Windows 11 images that have Microsoft 365 apps installed, Teams optimizations, and everything baked in. We are currently working on getting another extra image in there, which is more optimized for a better performance experience, meaning that we remove some of the services out of Windows 11, which gives you a little bit more resources like as available for working in your Cloud PC. So we will ship that soon as an option, which we already support for Windows 10. So I'm not sure if it will ship in the next 3 or 4 weeks because we normally ship during Patch Tuesday, but definitely keep an eye out on our public-facing roadmap where you will see more information on that as well. And security baselines with Windows 11 support have been shipped too. Management and Cloud PC configurations are pretty hot off the press. Like 1.5 weeks ago, we shipped nested virtualization support. So in an 8-core license, we support nested virtualization, meaning that you can run Hyper-V, Docker, Sandbox, all those services, WSA, Windows Subsystem for Linux, for example, all supported in that Cloud PC license. And we are currently working on perhaps making it available for the 4-core license too. So stay tuned for that. It takes a little bit more time due to capacity requests and such, but that will come as well. Point in time restore now available, so you can restore Cloud PC to like 7 days back or 3 days back in time as an end user as well as an IT admin in the MEM console. So pretty easy if you have something happening and you need to go back to recover your cloud PC, you can easily do that right now as well. It's just as easy as just flipping a box. It does a reboot and then it goes back to where it was those couple of days back if you select that. In the Windows 365 business product, which is our product, which is even more simpler and focuses on 100 to 300 users, we improved as well the IT admin experience in there. So you can now change the rights of the user to local administrator or just local user, which is the default. And you can change from Windows 11 to Windows 10 or the other way around, of course. And we are currently working on more of those improvements, like localized experience, like the language packs, and so some other enhancements as well for the Windows 365 business product. And think about as well in the future that with the business product, you can as well choose to enroll your devices into Intune. So Microsoft 365 Lighthouse support is now in GA for the enterprise product, will come for business as well pretty soon. And what does that mean? If you're an MSP partner, you can have multi-tenant support to do multi-tenant management above like all your partners or customers at the same time. So you can go into the Lighthouse portal and you can see all your tenants that you maintain as a partner in just one single pane of glass unified experience view. So that's unique because that has never been done before for like a virtualized kind of experience. What Windows 365 can deliver only as part of that experience today. And you can do like threat management protection from a multi-tenancy management perspective as well. And there are more services will be stacked and added soon to that offering, to that list of services that are supported in the Lighthouse portal. So now a little bit more exciting stuff. So let me see. Okay, this is the right slide. The things that are coming next, like what's coming out in the roadmap. And of course, I cannot share everything because it's not an NDA event here, but the things that I can share are on this list here. So first of all, we will ship Azure AD Join. So Azure AD Join support is already supported, but as well, on top of that, we are working on improving the end user experience when you are logging on into the portal and going into the Windows 365 session, meaning that right now, as you probably know, if you're a customer already, that you need to authenticate once more if you click on the Cloud PC. So what we will release soon is that the single sign-on experience, so we will remove that secondary authentication box from that user authentication flow that is available today. And that creates that single sign-on experience that customers really want. So that's something we are working on. US GovCloud is coming as well. So we're working hard with the GovCloud team to get everything done to ship that as well. Experience and profiles. One thing we will ship for the enterprise product, which is already available for the business product, is reset your VM, your profile inside your Cloud PC. So an end user can just reset the Cloud PC to the original factory kind of default, and then you can just start from a clean plate again. And the other 4 features that are underneath that are ones that I really would like to touch base on with some demos as well on the next slide. So that's Windows 365 app, switch, boot, and offline. An app is our new native app for Windows, meaning a Windows 365 app with all the branding and all the capabilities you know of in the web portal as well, from within Windows 11 and as well for Windows 10. So I will show you that in just a bit. Switch is how you can switch between your Cloud PC and your local PC from within the Windows shell. So it's a unique experience that has never been done before to switch between your Windows 11 local PC to your Cloud PC in just a snap without any complexity in between. And Windows 365 boot is a new feature that we are working on, how you can boot directly into a Cloud PC from a lighter weight, purposely built device from the Windows shell as well. So no trade-off in experience, just Windows as an end user thinks, I'm logging into Windows, and once the user types in their credentials or recognizes, or the Windows Hello for Business recognizes the face of the person, you go directly straight into your Cloud PC instead of going first local and then to the client and then eventually become part of or log into your Cloud PC session. So all kinds of simplicity, which we have sort of on top of mind while we design features. Windows 365 offline mode is working offline in a cloud PC. So what does that mean? A replication incrementally will happen to the local PC. So if you work in your cloud PC in the future and you are offline due to a connection error, or you board a plane, or you are at a location where there's no internet, almost impossible these days, but it could still be, then the replication to your local PC activates as primary. And then when you're back on the internet, it like uploads the data back up to the cloud, and then the performance and as well the experience is consistent, and there's no data loss in between. So I have a demo on that real quick as well. And on the security management layer, we will make secure boot the default pretty soon as well as part of your cloud PC. So currently we support secure boot, but we will auto enable it in our cloud PCs. Point in time restore is already available. We will make it available in GA pretty soon, and we'll improve more and more on backup and restore and cross-region replication as well. E-discovery support is coming, meaning you can export the complete cloud PC hard drive to hand it over for forensic analysis. So that's coming as well. The disk encryption improvement, we already have disk encryption improvements, or better than just native, like normal, not encrypted disks. We already have the encryption that is default as part of Azure, for example, but we will improve that with enhancements with BYOKey support. And we're looking into BitLocker support as well to see if we can make that all supported just like you do on a physical PC as well. And there are resize enhancements coming too, meaning that you can down and upgrade and change the OS disk size as well as part of your resize. So I see some client features. So the main difference here, Morten, is that Zen Client had so many components that are or were like dependencies of making Zen Client work and have it be like in a successful kind of good experience state. And with this feature, we own the operating system from top to bottom, and that creates way more capabilities to build a purpose-built like endpoint that is in a match with what we need in the cloud as well to create that synchronized experience. So yeah, I will show it to you. So here are the 4 features, and for the sake of time, I'm running over them a little bit quicker. So Windows 365 app, boot, switch, and offline. App is that Windows client experience that is unique to Windows 365, which will come inbox into Windows 11. So no need to download the client for Windows 11. It just ships as part of the operating system. Windows 365 boot is the operating system version that we are developing that can boot straight up to your cloud PC instead of going local and then from local to the client and then up to the cloud PC. Switch is a shell integration, so you can switch between your desktops, your task queue feature of Windows now as well directly to your cloud PC. And offline mode, just shared, is that you can work offline as well as online, and the end user doesn't recognize there's any difference between online and offline cloud PCs. So let me show you real quick how Windows 365 app works. So here you see that the Windows 365 app is part of Windows 11, so you can just start it. And it just works out of the box if you have a Windows 365 tenant, so it works with single sign-on. No need to subscribe or do anything complex in between if you're an end user. And here you see the first run experience of that client with a link to the switch experience, as you can see here. So the user can basically decide what is the best pick, the client or the switch. And here you see the unique experiences we provide with Windows 365, reset, restore, resize, and all those capabilities the end user can do. And if you click on connect, you will log on directly into the cloud PC, full screen, and can continue where you left off within like Excel, for example. If you were using a different other client we support, like an iPhone or Android or Linux or just a web client, for example. So then we have Windows 365 Switch, which is the task view integration. You probably all know task view, which is next to the loop icon between Teams and Loop. You see that gray with black like square, and that's the task view feature. And that's something that you can use today on Windows 11 and Windows 10 as well. And what is unique right now, what we are working on with the Windows team, is that you can now connect directly to your cloud PC desktop in there as well. As you can see on the right side, your cloud PC desktop boots and connects straight into your cloud PC. And then you continue where you left off. You see as well notification that you are in your cloud PC. And then in that cloud PC, you can also switch back to your local PC, meaning that you can then round trip between personal, like private related work, and as well business related work in your corporate environment. So that round tripping experience is something unique and new and has never been done before. And it's just great to see that Windows is really thinking in a hybrid remote working solution to bake these kind of experiences into the operating system. So with like Citrix and VMware and other technologies in market, like those last 30, 25 years have always been on top of Windows. And this is kind of a unique experience that we built into Windows while using remoting technology to log into your environment, which runs in one of the Azure Cloud data centers that we support. So really unique. And I think very powerful in the new way of working to meet the customers where they want to be today, in like working from home or from the office, or just in a sort of hybrid scenario when you're traveling a lot, where this feature is really helpful to make that easier. So the other one that I would like to show is Windows 365 Boot. So with Windows 365 Boot, you boot directly into Windows, as you can see here. But the difference is that once like Windows Hello for Business recognizes you and succeeds in logging on, is that after that you boot directly into your cloud PC. So no need to go to your local PC, download the client or click on the client or do things like that. No, it boots directly into your cloud PC and it feels like a localized experience. So this experience just feels like you work locally in your cloud PC, or locally on your local PC while you work in your cloud PC. And that's a unique experience that we want to provide with Windows 365 Boot from within the Windows shell. So I hear you thinking, hey, thin clients and such, those kind of experiences are not new, right? No, that's true. Like kiosk mode and Windows IoT and those kind of experiences have been around for a while, but not from an experience that it feels like a local Windows experience from like end to end, from when you log on to the session itself. So we are currently working with different partner teams as well as other teams in Microsoft to see how we can sort of create a set of devices or purpose-built like proposed devices, let's say it like that, lighter weight for cheaper cost than a normal laptop, to make this feature best possible for the use case where you connect to a cloud PC and then have a good mix of, hey, how much do you pay for your cloud PC and how much do you pay for your local device, and have that in a good handshake as well moving forward for a good return of investment. And then we have the Windows 365 offline mode experience. So this is a very quick demo. Okay, that was my text, my Cortana, I think. Let me restart this once more. So here you see the Windows 365 offline demo, and if you lose connectivity while you work in your cloud PC, while you board a plane, it will detect that you're not connected to the internet anymore, and then it will set up offline mode for Windows 365. So the replication that happens on the background automatically will activate, and then the changes that you do will synchronize back to your cloud PC. And then you will see that the connection will be set up to the cloud PC again once you're back online. And then the cloud PC session remains active, and the changes you did while you worked offline will remain the same, as that synchronized state to your cloud PC remains active on the background when you work in your cloud PC. And when you lose connection, then you can continue to work from your local PC replication. And then once you're back online, that local PC replication synchronizes back to the cloud PC. So that were kind of the demos I prepared for today. Are there any questions so far for me? Feel free to unmute yourself. I see some activity in the chat.
Hey, Christiaan, there was a question from Andrew, and it was, how does offline mode work? Is there a local differencing disk? Sounds pretty cool. Can you give any feedback on how it works behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I like always that people sort of talk and ask questions about, hey, what's happening on the background? So the offline mode experience is an experience that we are currently like designing, not developing yet. So it's a more future vision that we have in more than a year from now. So I just want to be clear there. The other features I showed are more like in the execution phase already, without sharing any timelines. What we use in the background, and I still cannot share everything because we're patenting the complete feature and the components that we use, is we, as I said, we replicate the state of the VM to the local PC, and we use something called confidential VMs and a new feature in processors that can encrypt the local VM up to the cloud. So the state from your local VM component to the VM that you use on Azure, and that can stay in a synchronized state while also being encrypted. That's one of the components we use, and of course, components of OneDrive too. So that's kind of the example of how we ship features in Microsoft. While we ship features, we always look to, hey, what do we have already in Microsoft? What can we use? What can we leverage? What is kind of the work that another team did for like 5 or 10 years? How can we use that and sort of consolidate that around a new concept? And I think that's very powerful because that creates partnerships and synergies in Microsoft to work more together and not reinvent the wheel, for example, again, while like your neighbor is doing the same thing at campus. So that's kind of the information I can share on it. So it's a full replication of the VM, and with sync engine improvements, as well as specific items that we create for Windows 365, we make it possible to incrementally synchronize and not like have a pipeline of 2 GB open while you work in your cloud PC to have like that accurate sync state ongoing. So I hope that helps.
There was one other question that was from Morten. Is does the boot to cloud PC require a Windows endpoint?
Yeah, that's required. So the end-to-end experience for Windows 365 boot will require a Windows endpoint. It's a Windows operating system that runs on top of that endpoint, and it's completely managed via MEM. So we will have a guided flow in MEM that guides an IT admin through, hey, what are my endpoints? Select your endpoints. It's sort of an autopilot experience, but then more simpler, especially or specifically for the Windows 365 boot experience. And then you select your device, some policies, Wi-Fi settings, perhaps some specific cloud PC settings, like what do you want to redirect or not, like clipboard, like drive redirection. Do you want to do that or want to make that optional? And then once you click on provision, then that endpoint will get the right configuration and all the configuration policies that it needs in order to log on to your cloud PC directly from that operating system. So it will be Windows only. But in the future, of course, we might want to do for other platforms similar things. But currently, if you want to do it from Linux, we defer to partners that we have today. So I hope that that helps. I see a question: when are the trials coming back? Good question. We have trials. If you reach out to a Microsoft rep, accountant, they can help you with trial licenses. But we are working on making the trials back available. So stay tuned for that too. And I see another, is there an option to automate ending grace period immediately? I think that's a question maybe for you, Donna, for your next session. Another question, let's see, always be in my heart. I think we covered them all right now. Is Cortana still a thing? Yeah, it seems it is. There's a gesture which gets activated when I say a specific word. It's just like, hey Siri, then it pops up my Cortana, and that's what happened when I showed the offline mode experience. So with that, like one more thing, if you're willing to learn more, dive deeper into this service, and you want to get trained on the service, you can go to ak.ms/Windows365/accelerator. We have an event coming up next week with Jeremy Chapman from Microsoft Mechanics and Scott Manchester, the PM lead, the director of PM of our service, which has been leading Azure Virtual Desktop as well. And I'm showing up there as well. And we will dive deep into the vision, roadmap as well, how you can deploy Windows 365 and some tips and tricks too. So if you're interested, it's a free event happening next week. It's maybe a little bit late for the people in Europe and such, but I think it's still doable if you drink a beer on the side or just enjoy some snaps. I think it would be a lot of fun. So if you're interested, you can just go to that link and sign up there as well. And with that, I would like to give it back to Morten or Donna. I'm not sure how you want to do this, but it was great to be here. So I will stick around a little bit on the side on the chat, and looking forward to see the rest of the sessions.
Thank you, Christiaan, for a great session. It was really great to see all the new features and what's coming next into the Windows 365. So let me share my screen here and let me know when you can see it.
I can see your screen. I can.
Oops. Yep. There we go. All right. So tips and features for end user experience. So what is this about? Well, as it's stated here, it's about the overall end user experience. And the end user experience is, as I know of, one of the most important thing when doing not only Windows 365 or any virtual desktop, but just in general. And when looking at Windows 365 or a cloud PC, there are some differences from a virtual device to a physical device. And that's some of the things that we are going to look into now and see how can we optimize that for a better end user experience, either with some built-in features that we just can enable, or by doing some what I will call a quick and dirty workaround, but it works. So it's pretty much just to optimize the whole end user experience. And end user experience for me personally is just not what's inside the box of a cloud PC or a physical device. I mean, the end user experience really starts when the user thinks of that he or she will connect to the cloud PC. So how is the experience from the login to the end of the session and even after the session for doing some other stuff like restart and resize and such things. So before we get into it, I've already told you who I am, so I won't spend much time on that one. But we're doing a weekly newsletter on the W365 community every week. It comes out every Friday, 2 p.m. CET. So if you want to know about the latest news around Windows 365 every week, make sure to follow us on Twitter. And let's get into it. So Windows 365 or a cloud PC experience is actually a pretty good experience, I must say. From the first time that I ever tried it, I was kind of surprised how well it actually worked, and especially with the Windows 365 web URL, as we can see here. There are, however, some things that I think that you as an IT administrator can look into and enable or configure some stuff to really bring that end user experience up to another level. So some of the things that we will go through here is the subscribe experience, the login experience. How do we ensure that everything is being installed on the cloud PC before users get into their desktop. And then we will also take a look about optimization for video streams and some, I would say, some minor issues about Google search and that non-admin users are not able to restart their cloud PC. But I will get to there. So the subscribe experience, for those of you who've been using Cloud PC or maybe Azure Virtual Desktop, you might be familiar with this app. And this is the remote desktop client for Windows that is also available on macOS, iOS, and Android. And even though that the web client is really good and really responsive when you're logged in, you're missing some features such as the camera redirection and the optimization for Teams meetings. And for me personal, and I also think for a lot of users, we tend to go back to this remote desktop client app because it has those features that we need. So if we take a look at the first run experience from a user perspective, I really like that it's just, let's get started right away. It excites me. But then I look a bit down and I see two options. And this is something that I don't like for users to have options to choose from. But we have two options here, and we have a subscribe and then a subscribe with URL. If the user press on the subscribe, the user will be presented with a Microsoft login prompt, as they know it from other Microsoft services, such as Outlook on the web, for example. If they are, however, clicking on the subscribe with URL, well, they will be presented with a much different experience. So here they will have to type in their email address or the URL for the RD web endpoint in order to be able to communicate with the Cloud PC. So if you want to give the user ability to use their email address, you will have to set up a feature called email discovery that I will come back to. But just having these two different options here is just a mess, if you ask me, and we should be able to also subscribe on behalf of the user so they can get right into and connect to the Cloud PC. And we can actually do that on Windows corporate devices that I will show you in a bit. But coming back to the subscribe with URL, we still need to focus on that one, even though we have our corporate Windows devices all cleared up, because when coming from macOS, iOS, and Android, you're only able to connect to your Cloud PC by doing the subscribe with URL. So we also have to focus on that one and not only just the Windows part. And yeah, the subscribe with URL, you also need that if you want to add more accounts into your remote desktop client. That's the way you do it. And for internal users, I'm not sure how many are using multiple different accounts. I have one customer that are having multiple accounts for their environment. But me as an IT consultant, I'm working on customers that are having Azure Virtual Desktop environments, Windows 365 environments, and it's nice for me to just add it all there in one pane of glass. So taking a look at the auto subscribe feature, it's fairly easy. It's just a registration key under the current user, and you can create it with a script if you like, but you can also use Endpoint Manager that has it integrated into setting catalogs. And yeah, once it's enabled in here, you paste the RD web URL in there, and it will automatically subscribe for the user. And how does that look from a user perspective? So I'm hoping that you can see the difference here. I have recorded two sessions here, one without the auto subscribe and one with the auto subscribe. So if we take the without auto subscribe first, you can see here we got presented by the two options. Now this user is really smart that he knows that we have to select the blue one, and we are being presented with our logged on credentials on the device because it's a corporate device. So to be fair, for me, that was not that bad. I mean, I could live with that. But looking from an end user perspective, we all know that even though how many guides we send out to the users beforehand or whatever we tell them, we still have some users that don't click on the blue one, right? So to minimize the support cases and the overall experience for the users, we have configured the auto subscribe, and it looks a bit different. So the first time experience here, we click on the remote desktop client, and we can see on the top it's actually also subscribing for us. Now it went a little fast, so I'm just gonna play here. I hope that you guys can see it when I'm playing the video. But this really removes the confusion of having those options. And the users will still be able to subscribe with URLs if they need to add multiple accounts later on. So we don't remove that feature. So this is great. Now we have our covered Windows devices all covered. Users are also subscribing. But what about those who are coming from macOS and iOS and Android? We still have to take care of those users because when connecting, you can only connect with the URL, and typing that URL, typing that RD web URL into a iPhone to connect to a cloud PC is not a good experience. I can assure you for that. So what we can do is we can create a public DNS record here that will allow us to use our domain name to resolve these URLs, so the users can easily log into to their cloud PCs and subscribe. Martin is stated here there are use cases, but for employees with laptop desktop already, I would only use the cloud PC for something that can be reached. Oh, was that for another question?
Sooner was asking questions, so not for you, Morten. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so that's how we can optimize the experience when the user wants to log into the cloud PC. So this is our very first step here. And now the user has subscribed to the cloud PCs and are ready to log in. So how do we ensure that everything is set up nice and clean, all the apps are installed like we know it on our hybrid devices? We are maybe already using autopilot devices. How do we ensure the same setup here? Well, we can use the enrollment status page. And for those who are familiar with autopilot, you most likely know ESP and how it's set up. And we can do basically the same thing here. We can enable ESP and tell it that the user cannot access the device before everything is has been installed. So that's just all fine. But the big difference here from a physical autopilot device is that with cloud PC devices, we are only limited to use the default ESP profile, and this can cause some confusions for existing devices. When using the default ESP profile, it's always assigned to all devices, and you cannot change that. So even though that you have many custom ESP, your cloud PC will just jump over all of them and down to default ESP, no matter what you do. So what you can do here is enable the default ESP, and if you only want to use ESP for your cloud PCs, but not your physical devices, you can create a new default ESP that is a custom ESP and assign that to all devices to make sure that all devices are hitting the custom ESP. And then you have to ensure that the show app and profile configuration is set to no and not yes. Then every device will hit that one as the new default ESP, and all your cloud PC will jump over it as it was non-existable and jumping down to default ESP. So the issue here is that it's making some complex scenarios now, and Microsoft is aware about the default ESP thing. It's stated as a known issue in their documentation, and when stuff is stated as known issue in documentation, it's typically because they are looking into it. Hopefully in the future, I hope. I don't care if it's months or years, but we really need this feature because ESP is helping us giving that crisp to the end user experience right before they hit that desktop. We don't want the user to come into that desktop before everything is set up and running. I can see there's a hand here from...
Hey, Jacob here. I have a question because by default, the software really should apply for the device groupers, yes? So
Yeah.
if we want to use the ESP for the cloud PC, we should apply the software for the user group, and that will be installed, that software will be installed on the cloud PC ESP in that case, yes? If we apply that software to the device, it will be not installed. Is right?
No. So if you apply the software to the device, device will already start to install it even though the user haven't logged in for the first time, because the process of a cloud PC provisioning is actually the cloud PC is being created, and they will link it to your user, and therefore you will it will already start the process of doing the device configuration and device application. So in theory, if you deploy everything to your cloud PC on device level, then you can spin up a device days before the user ever logs on. And when the user logs in, it will quickly do a check on the user settings to check if there's any user settings it needs to install something. And then it will quickly go into the desktop. But if you are assigning stuff to the user level, it will take some time for the ESP because it's only caching the user stuff when the user logs in. But the device stuff is a almost instant action after the cloud PC is deployed.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So to get a good from rail, I don't know if that's an English word. A good practice is to deploy things to device level. Then your device cloud PC can install things without any user interactions. If you are familiar with the user-driven autopilot stuff, the user have to log into the machine for the machine to grab all the configuration for the device setup and account setup, and we don't have that here because we are in a virtual environment and the provisioning is a bit different than a physical device. Yeah. So that was about ESP, and now that we have ESP covered and making sure that the user have all their apps and configuration profiles, certificates before they hit the desktop, I will briefly cover the language settings here because that was actually a quite of a mess before. And as Christiaan mentioned, we just got the localized settings here that we can choose right from the provisioning policy. So before we had this, we actually had to create a custom image to manage the localized language settings by default. So imagine you have maybe 5 regions you're deploying cloud PCs to, and you want to give the users the language they're used to from the physical device. You will have to manage 5 custom images, and that's just a big mess and not a road that I will recommend ever going down to. And this could also cause IT administrators not to give users the experience that they expect because there are so much more management in custom images. So by having this Windows language settings directly into the portal really gives us a opportunity to easily manage the localized language inside the Windows for the end user, because I can truly say if the end user comes into a cloud PC and they expect some specific language and it's not there, you will definitely be hearing about it. So this really gives us the opportunity to meet the user at what they are needing and we can really scale this really fast. So taking a first step, that now we have also giving the user the language they want. They really love Danish, so they of course got Danish. Now they're ready to be productive with their cloud PC. They're ready to work, and we cannot say work without saying Microsoft Teams. And yeah, Microsoft Teams is being used everywhere now. It's been hell of a journey since it launched, and such amazing features. So when Windows Virtual Desktop was announced, there was a lack of performance issues when it comes to Teams, but that has been resolved now with the Teams optimization. And by default, all cloud PCs are optimized by default for Teams for the audio and video redirection. So why do we need to care about Teams as IT administrators? Well, there are some things that we need to be aware of, and there are also things that we need to update. So the first thing here is the Teams optimization is only available for remote desktop client on Windows and Mac OS. So if you are using a Mac OS, the user have to manually go in and enable that feature in the preferences after downloading the app. And I also think I told you in the start, but I really like the Windows 365.microsoft.com portal, and I think it's really, really great. But I'm having a lot of Teams call, and a lot of users are having them, so we tend to go back to remote desktop client. And I'm really looking forward for the Windows 365 app, and hoping that it would give us the best of both worlds. So we have some awareness that we have to tell the users for them to get the good experience, they have to use this specific app. But for audio and video redirection to work properly, there's a component called WebRTC, and the WebRTC are installed by default when deploying Cloud PC, but sometimes it also gets an update. And this is where that we have to help the users updating their component to make sure the experience is as good as possible. So we can either do this by waiting for the new update come out, package the update with maybe some Win32 app, and then deploy it to all recent cloud PCs. Or we can use proactive remediation. And thanks to Donna Ryan, she has been doing a great job completing that. So you can actually find a script for it to keep your WebRTC updated automatically. And you can find it on the official Windows 365 PowerShell script gallery repo in GitHub. And I also think there will become more scripts into that official GitHub, but let's see in the future. So it's important to have this WebRTC in mind when managing cloud PCs for good end user experience. And now that we are talking about audio and video redirection, we can go further to browser experience, because when looking at user behavior, it's not that uncommon that users are watching some kind of video in a browser. This can either be to learning, like on LinkedIn Learning, or maybe Microsoft Learn. It could also be on the organization internal site where they have internal training. So using the browser to learn stuff in your work time is not that uncommon. And how can we optimize that as the Teams client has been optimized? And this is where the multimedia redirection comes in, or also MMR. This is a feature that are currently in preview and has been for a long time now, but hopefully it will come GA soon. If we take a look how the users will have this thing to work, they will have to get a browser extension, and they will have to get a MMR component. And this browser extension and MMR component are only compatible with Edge and Chrome. The browser extension you can install as you do with all other extensions. And the MMR component, you can wrap it into a Win32 app and deploy it on the cloud PC, and it will be all there. And maybe, who knows, when the product goes GA, maybe we will have it as default like the Teams optimization, but I don't know. Let's hope so. There's a current limitation to the product here because it only works with a remote desktop client on Windows. And that client has to be in the insider update ring. So there are a couple of things here. It's of course a lag that is only working on Windows, but let's hope it will spread out more when it comes GA. And the other thing is that currently it requires to be in the insider ring of the remote desktop client on the user's PC. So normally I wouldn't recommend having all the users be in the insider ring. Yes, they will get the latest updates when they're going into beta, but that can also cause some serious trouble. So having a small group of users inside the insider ring is always a good thing to see if there is any issues that we need to take care of. And hopefully when it comes to GA, the requirement of insider ring is no longer present. I hope not, but let's see. The current supported sites are YouTube, Facebook, Fox Sports, IMDb, Microsoft Teams live events on web, and site with embedded YouTube videos. And as you can see on the picture, there's actually a box saying enable for all sites. Checking that box will not enable it for all sites. It doesn't work for all sites, I can tell you that. But it's actually meant for organizations to test it on internal sites with videos. So now something that I'm really excited about, if you can see any difference here, but let's check. So I have two recordings here on my cloud PC, one with the MMR and one without the MMR. And you should see that the video here on the left is very laggy, and sometimes it just stops playing and then continues. And this is not a good experience if you're trying to learn something or trying to hear something as well. The audio is not that accurate. So hopefully you will see that when I'm playing the other video over here, it will be a lot more smooth. And perhaps you will see it kind of laggy as well because we're on a Teams sharing here. But just try it yourself. This MMR really works pretty good, and I have tried to compare it with my physical device, and I can not see a difference here. And now I can see that it's currently lacking a bit, but I think it's because of the screen sharing. But when this pops into GA, this is definitely a feature that I will enable as default to cloud PCs, because this is really great. All right. I'm not sure how much time I have left. Yeah, there's sometimes. Good.
You've still got about another 10 minutes. Go. You keep going. You're doing awesome.
Right. So another issue here. So as I said at the start, Cloud PC is your physical device in the cloud, but there's obviously some difference. One is the network between, and two is in another location than your physical device. So what has this brought of issues? And taking a look at how users are working today, users actually tend to use Google pretty much. I didn't knew that before going into Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, then Azure Virtual Desktop, then Windows 365. But the issue that I'm seeing here is or the users are seeing here is that if they're located in another location where the data center aren't, for example, we have users in Denmark or Sweden, we have our cloud PCs in West Europe. When users are doing a Google search, it will display the language of Dutch. And that's because the breakout point the cloud PC is coming from is in the Netherlands. And this makes Google complete useless. So can we just fix Google? No, we cannot. Unfortunately, the problem is not directly with the Google itself. It's also happening to other services like Bing and Google Maps. Basically, everything that is trying to locate your internet breakout and redirecting you to that language experience. So how can we fix this? Well, we can fix it in multiple ways. Users can fix it manually by going into preferences, not recommended. We can set up a proxy server, so we proxy everything down over to Denmark, and then we have everything in Danish. Everyone will be happy, but I don't want to proxy anything. We can do some network stuff, so we can route everything through a firewall and net everything, so it believes that we are in Denmark as well. So that's three bad options I don't like. So what I want to do as IT administrator, I want to do it on the fly for the users without the requirements of a proxy server and etc. So what I did, I took a look at, okay, how does the Google function when searching and redirecting the users? And of course, if you're using Cloud PC on your own VNet with the routing internet traffic down to your site, you will not see this problem at all, and you will be good to go. And I mean, it's not every country that sees the problem. If you live in the Netherlands, you will not be bothered by this, but this is just a nice thing. But bringing the physical device experience to the Cloud PC, this is not a good thing that users are not able to read what they're searching for. So there is mainly three different areas that we have to take a look at, and that's the search suggestions. So when we type something in the address bar, it will come with some suggestions of what we are looking for. That's one thing. The other thing is if we type something in the address bar and press enter, it will use a unique URL to define our search, and we will have to configure that as well. And then if a user starts on bing.com, they will pretty much go up and write google.com instead, and we also have to figure out a way to configure that. So for those of you who has been messing around with edge policies and making sure Google is the default search provider and etc., it's actually the same thing that we need to do. We just have to add a little more specific text in here. So let me take my pen here. Yeah. So in this section here below, we actually have the URL suggestions. So this is when I'm writing something in the address bar and it will come with some suggestions. So here I have stated that, well, I will be using a Google-based URL for my suggestions. But I also have pasted another line in here. And this is actually the same redirection line that Google are using, just without the specified language with it. So in here, I have stated that I want the result to be displayed as US. And this is what it's doing. So if I set in DK for Danish, then will display Danish for me. And in here we have the search provider URL for when searching from the address bar. That's the search string that it will do, and it's the same string that we will paste in here, and with a language specific thing. So that was 2 out of 3. So what happens if users are going directly to google.com and do the search? well, it will just bypass this one. So what I spent a lot of time figuring out is how can we choose that for the user. And the workaround here is, yeah, quite a nasty one if you ask me. But you have to set the application local and change it to another thing than the default. So my application local by default when deploying is en-us. So if I set it as en-gb, Google somehow forces the search result when searching directly at Google to be in English. But if I just set it to en-us as my default application local, nothing will happen. And here you can just see a quick before and after comparison about that. I have written 2 blog posts about specific this issue, and the first blog post was in, I think it was before Cloud PC came. I saw this in Azure Virtual Desktop, and I'm deploying all these settings with the GPO and such, and you also have all my troubleshooting there. And the other thing is for the Cloud PCs with Intune. So, and I must say this is not a permanent fix at all. The users will still see ads on Google as the native breakout point. So if Dutch, for example, and this is just a dirty workaround. But for users to not be able to read the search result on Google, because a lot of users actually uses Google, even though they know the exact address where they're going, they're still Googling stuff. And I actually do it too. It's just not a good experience seeing a different language that you're used to. So going to the next thing here is when I first saw Cloud PC launch, and I saw that we could take action, or the user could take action outside of their Cloud PC, I was really excited, and I think this was a really great step, and really completes the whole cycle of the user experience as well. I was not so excited when I logged into my Cloud PC as a non-administrator user, and I could see that I was not able to restart my Cloud PC within Windows. I could, of course, just open a web browser and log into Windows 365.microsoft.com and restart it in there. But from what the users are coming from, they should at least get the same capabilities and options on Cloud PCs. So I've deep dived into this one to make sure that non-admin users have the same experience, at least as they do on the physical device. And to make a long story short, the issue is that on the default Cloud PCs images, the group users are removed from the user rights assignment policy called shut down the system. And this policy contains permissions to shut down a PC and restart a PC. So it has two in one there. And I understand why the user shouldn't be able to shut down the PC, because we have no control over the underlying Hyper-V environment and such thing. But at least they should be able to restart it. And administrators are there by default. So all administrators are actually able to shut down their Cloud PC. So by adding the users back into that group, they are able to see the restart and are able to restart. They will not see the shutdown button because it's hidden by default with a registration key. So they will not accidentally shut down their machines. This fix can, of course, be done by a Powershell script deployed from Intune, so the users will have the button right from the start. Be aware that even though the users are not able to shut down their PC from the power options menu, they can still start a PowerShell or CMD and type in, I think it's called shutdown-s, and the system will for sure shut down. Don't worry about that, it will. And the users are not able to start it. But then I found out that if they go back into the Windows 365 portal and click on restart on it, they are actually able to force a startup of their cloud PCs. So you can say there's kind of a risk that users might be able to shut down their cloud PCs even though they're not intending to. But to be honest, I'm not worried about that. If a user can go into PowerShell and know the command, well, yeah, I don't think that's a very common scenario, to be honest. I think the users are more than happy to just could restart their device as they know it from their physical device. And if you're interested, I have the PowerShell script on my GitHub repo and in my blog article on my website. So point in time restore, this brings us back to give the users the ability to do the actions outside of their cloud PCs. So as I mentioned in the start, end user experience is not only what happens inside the cloud PCs, but also outside the cloud PCs and how the user can interact with it. So point in time restore is an awesome feature. It allows users to restore their cloud PC to a backup being made in another time. And it's always enabled by default. And the default interval is 12 hours. And you can specify a more specific interval for your users. And this can be done under the Windows 365 panel in Endpoint Manager under user setting, where you also will be setting your local admin permission for them. There's a maximum restore point of 10, and both admin and users are able to restore. However, you have to grant a user access in here. By this, allow users to initiate restore service before they can do it. Just quick, what can the administrator do? Well, the administrator can restore the cloud PC just like the user can, and the administrator can also do a bulk restore before or after a specific time, or to whatever is closest to that date that you specify. So if you want to do a massive restore, you can do that. And just from the user perspective, this is how it's looking in the user interface portal. So right under the restart button, we have to restore, and the user have to select yes, I want to restore this cloud PC. If the user restore cloud PC to a point they're not happy about and want to get back, they cannot do that. So that's of course important to let them know. And that's really wrap it up from my tips and features to do stuff to the cloud PC endpoint compared to the features that we also can do on the physical device. So I didn't notice if there came any questions, and also feel free to speak up. Just unmute yourself and let's have a talk if you like. Else I can try to see if there's any questions here. Will you share the videos on your YouTube channel? Yes, we have planned to share this event later on, yes. And also the slides.
It was the comparison between the
sorry.
MMR and without MMR.
Yeah.
So just so they can see it in real life. Comparison.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Bandwidth requirement for MMR. I'm not actually quite sure. I'm not quite sure. Don't forget to mention enterprise search, which is often forgotten when changing the search engine. Yeah, true. True. instead of the Office 365 new tab experience and configure a link for Google search with the parameters mentioned. Okay, yeah. So you're meaning when the users are doing a new tab, they will be presented by Google and not the Office start screen like that. Is that what you think about, Jesper?
No, you can actually configure the 3 first icons on the new tab experience. And what we've done in a few places is we actually added Google, the search engine, as the first one, based on, I don't even know if it's a fact, but it seems that, I think you mentioned as well, a lot of users do not know you can search from the address bar. So they type in Google and go to Google, and then they search whatever they want. So we discovered that just adding the Google to one of the 3 first icons, you can add up to 3, just gave a better experience, because what you see, you click on and you're on Google, and it's just a comment, really.
Yeah, it's
because
really good.
The Office 365 Start tab is really good for enterprise search, where you can search internal resources and documents and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so I think the combination of those two is quite cool.
Yeah, I think really good. I will definitely try to look into that. Definitely. And I'm not really quite sure how we will see this work in the future. I mean, this is definitely something that other Microsoft have to look into. How are we going to take the location and maybe redirect it up to our virtual device and use that location as the search language? I don't know, but hopefully we will see a real fix and not just a dirty workaround, as I call it. So Jacob saying here, cannot be used into settings catalog instead of the script. Are you referring to the restart button that are missing? If you are,
exactly.
Yeah. So no, not that I'm aware of. If someone else has the configuration for that, I will love to know it. But as for now, I don't have it. So I'm just using the script as a temporary solution for this issue. So any more questions? Else, I think I will give the word to Donna.
Awesome, great session. Lots of good stuff in there. So thank you very much for sharing. All right, let me get my PowerPoint fired up here. Now let me just go ahead and minimize all of these things that I've got open. I can close that and close that. All right. Go into Teams, and then I'm going to share out the screen too. All right, and then go into PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and kick this one off. There we go. Awesome. So my session is a Graph and PowerShell with Windows 365. I'll skip the intros because we already did that. Just for a point of clarification, the session isn't going to go deep into how Graph works, how to make queries. That's a whole session in and of itself just on Graph and the API. So I'm going to kind of cover the basics, and kind of explain where Windows 365 kind of fits into Graph, and how to start to leverage it, and get into working with the Microsoft.Graph PowerShell module. So firstly, let's go over the basics. So what does Graph do? Well, Graph API is just that, it's an API, and it gives us a way to programmatically communicate, in this case, to Azure. And it works over HTTP. Actually, what's pretty cool about that is the request is just a full URL string. It's pretty slick, actually. But in order for that to work, we need to supply some information. We need to know the tenant ID, so it knows what it's talking to who it's talking to, the app ID, which tells it specifically which enterprise app or app registration that it's talking to. We need some kind of authentication mechanism to ensure that you're actually allowed to run queries. And those authentication mechanisms can be, depending on what we do, it could be a user credential, it can be a certificate, either self-signed or PKI, or we can pass a secret. And if we have all of those, then what we can do is get an authorization token. And then the token allows us to talk to the API, query data, and pull it back out. And so when it at least comes to Azure and Graph, there's really two flavors of it. There's v10 and there's beta. And what's the difference? Well, essentially v10 is committed code that has been stable and has not been changed for X amount of time. I forget what the parameter was, but it's not anything super short. So it's stable, tried and true code. And there's beta, which is not long-term stable. So anything new is going to come into beta. And since Windows 365 is new, all of our calls are going to be done through beta. Now, when we're rolling out new Windows 365 features, we really do strive to have an API call for that new feature. So we really, for any buttons, pieces of data, checkboxes, that kind of stuff, if it's in the MEM portal, there's a really good chance that there does exist an API you can query. Now, in order to get access into that, really what we're talking about when we're looking at access is how are we going to connect in? And really we've got two ways. We've got delegated, which is really I'm going to spend more of my time with. Delegated really means user authentication. And so there has to be a user to pass their credentials. They get the Microsoft login prompt that we're now all well familiar with. But we can also do an application only access. And with that, we can do secrets, which is fairly common, and we can use certificates. And those are really going to be used in scenarios where we're going to get into some type of level of automation. But when we're talking with scopes, specifically for Windows 365, and scopes really do apply to every facet of Graph when we're talking to Azure. But specifically for Windows 365, there's really only two. There's cloudpc.read.all and there's cloudpc.readwrite.all. Depending on what type of action you're trying to execute, the scope may be different. So as an example, you just want to get a list of all your cloud PCs. Well, that's just a read. You want to make a new OPNC. Well, that's going to be a write because you're actually going to write data up there. The nice thing, and I'll show you where all this stuff lives, is that the Graph API documentation for Windows 365 is very good. And each API call has its own page that goes into examples, what scopes it needs, and other different languages that you could use to accomplish the same thing. I'm going to give you just a quick demo to kind of give you an idea of how to get started and kind of start playing around with Graph for those that may be uninitiated. We're going to use a tool called Graph Explorer. And that is a page that Microsoft has made that allows you to enter in your Graph calls, choose your, if you're going to go with beta or version 1. I'll show you how just to go ahead and retrieve Cloud PC data. I'm also going to go ahead and show you some of the documentation that exists for the Graph API, and as well as using PowerShell. So let me go ahead and get out of here, and let's go over here to Graph Explorer. The full URL is here. If you go ahead and just go ahead and Google Graph Explorer, you'll get right in here. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to sign in. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to, my personal lab. And I still have an authentication token, so I'm good. Since again, we're going to need to connect into the beta, we can go ahead and hit this drop down and go over into here. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and get an example of a query that I want to run. And so within the documentation of the Graph API docs, there's a whole section here for Cloud PC. And what's really nice is it's all broken out by category. And so if you want to just get Cloud PC information, there's various commands. You want to get image information, network connection, which up until recently was called OPNC, provisioning policies, all sorts of good stuff. Documentation is very well organized, very tidy. It makes it pretty easy to use. You know what I do here? Let me zoom that in just a little bit. All right, so I want to go ahead and list all my Cloud PCs. I just want to see what I have within my tenant. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is come down here, and this really is the main component. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And I'll go back to Graph Explorer. And what I'm going to do is get rid of this me. If we run that query, what it does is it actually returns data about the user that ran it. So we can see that, yeah, it knows who I am. Very clever. But we don't need that component there. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste in and get rid of that extra slash. And I can go ahead and run this query. And, you'll get the return code. So you get a 200. Hey, everything worked. You authenticated. We got your data. You may get a 404 or 402, depending if your permissions were set up correctly. The other thing that's great to use this for when you're just getting started with this is you can also, look at your access token, but you can also look at the permissions that have been set. And you'll see that, if one of those has been hit, you'll get a little red X. And so, like I said before, we have read all and read write all. I've went ahead and set those up and consented, so I can do whatever I want to. And by running that query, we've got I got 3 Cloud PCs in my lab. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. And just as a side note, this list query is one of the ones that I use the most because there's a lot of good information in there. The service plan, which tells you, the SKU or the size, the actual device name, and the device ID. So as you're going to try to take an action against a particular device, and if you only have the user, the UPN, you can query against the UPN to return the whole Cloud piece that's assigned, and then you can scrape the device ID, and then you can pass the ID, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff. It's scripting, there's you're almost limited to only by your imagination. But for getting started, kicking the tires, and kind of just getting a feel for it, Graph is fantastic, especially too as you're trying to write a script, and if you're anything like me, you go ahead and write the script and run it, and you get red text everywhere because it fails. It's nice to note that your query is sound before you go ahead and put it into your script, to at least make sure that at least part of what you're writing is actually functional. So really good stuff with it in the Graph Explorer. If you're just getting started, go ahead and play with this. One of the other things I wanted to show you about too with the documentation, with the permissions, like I said, we may have different type of permissions that we need, and so within this heading, we can see if we're doing delegated, which that's what I'm doing. We can need a work or school account, not a personal, and then it tells you permissions from least to most. So read absolutely works. But if you got read write all, that works too. And same thing with the application permission type. So depending on what you're trying to do, you might want to double check the permissions to make sure that you're only allocating just what you need. If we go further down, and this is a part that I really like, because I actually dig using the Graph SDK. And I'm going to go ahead and dig back into that a bit when I get back to the slide deck. But we can compare here both of the graph call, and this is really the same thing that I dumped into Graph Explorer. This is the PowerShell equivalent. It does the same thing. The nice thing too is it actually tells you which particular module that you need. I tend to load all the modules that you would need for Windows 365. That way I don't have to, pick and choose the specifics, but, depending on how you want to write your script, you may want to go ahead and just call the specifics that you need. There's other ones in here. I don't know Java or Objective-C. Maybe someday I'll learn C#, but PowerShell and HTTP is really where I bounce around. Now, just to kind of point out that there are docs for the PowerShell commands that are within the SDK, but the docs aren't organized as nicely as this. And so taking this example, I already have the page pulled up. And so there's our PowerShell commandlet equivalent with syntax. And, if you've looked up PowerShell equivalents, this all looks, fairly, standard, which it is. But the point I wanted to make is these are all just listed in alphabetical order under all of the graph PowerShell heading. So it's not broken up by Cloud PC or and even within the whole graph module, there's more things you can control than just Windows 365. There's Teams, there's all sorts of stuff, but it's not organized well. So if you're going to go down the PowerShell route, I still tend to leverage the graph API call and then cross-reference because it's just that much better organized. And so that's what I've got for this small demo here. So unless there are any questions, I don't have the chat pulled up, so I'm flying blind. If there's anything in there, speak now. Else I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on because I know we've got about 20 minutes left.
I think you can move on.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let me go ahead and go to this slide and from current. All right. So there is did I miss? Nope. Okay. So if we want to, if you're more comfortable working just with PowerShell and haven't started working with Graph yet, you can just use straight up PowerShell. And that's actually how I started working with this. There is the PowerShell Graph SDK, which is published, and its module is the Microsoft.graph module. And like I was alluding to, there's a ton of stuff in there that it has nothing to do with Cloud PC. Now, if you recall, made mention that we need to have an app ID and a tenant ID when we're making a graph connection. You don't need to necessarily do that with the graph module, because within everyone's tenant, there is a public enterprise app. I'll show you exactly where it lives. That everybody's tenant ID or app ID is the exact same across the board. So when you execute your script and it prompts you for credentials, that's how it determines which tenant it's connecting to. And then it knows by default, because we're connecting into this purpose-built enterprise app, we don't have to worry about trying to pass these GUIDs to it so it knows who to phone home to. And that works just fine with delegated. If you want to get into doing automation, that public enterprise app is not going to work. And in that case, you're going to need to make a custom app registration, which is actually pretty simple. I'm not really going to delve too much into that. If you're curious, there's plenty of good write-ups out there. That's a well-documented process. And really, if you're going to really just get into automation, that really is, the goal that you're going to want to get into, is to having that. As far as using the PowerShell SDK, though, we can use a certificate authentication or self-signed or PKI certs to make that authentication. And just, I pulled up my tenant and blocked out everything else that wasn't relevant. But you can see you've got this Microsoft Graph PowerShell. That's what our module is connecting to. And these sets of numbers are the same across the board for everybody. And so that's how it's able to function without you having to tell it specifically who to talk to. Just also wanted to point out as well, it's the same process for Graph Explorer. Everybody is the same. So when you go ahead and log in with Graph Explorer and put your credentials in, that's how it defines which tenant you're connecting to, and then it knows which app ID to connect with. Now, when we're looking at PowerShell modules, we still have to load a PowerShell module to go ahead and actually interact with native graph API calls, if you want to go ahead and use like the invoke REST method and all that kind of fun stuff. That module is msal.ps, which if you've been dorking around with Graph for a while, it supersedes MSOL. So depending on what you want to do or how you want to do it, you'll need to load a different module. What I did want to point out here, though, for if you're just using the pure PowerShell method, you can load the whole Microsoft .graph module. And like I said, there's a ton of stuff in there. These little sub modules, I don't know if there's probably a technical name for them that I don't know. Maybe daughter module, sub module. Everything we need for Windows 365 exists within these. And in some of my the scripts I've started publishing up to our repo, I've actually just started calling these for the sake of time and space. I ran into an issue with a very low RAM system where my script would barf if I tried to load the entire graph module. So just as a good practice for me, I've just started loading these. But there's nothing wrong with just loading the whole graph module. If it works for you, wonderful. So then the next question is going to be, now I got the modules loaded. What can I do with it? How do I find out what commands work? Because that site is kind of not that friendly. Well, there's a command you can run. And this is actually pretty slick. The get command dash module Microsoft.graph star and then star cloud PC star. Every cloud PC PowerShell function has cloud PC in it. So what this command is doing is it's just looking for all the commands that have cloud PC within their names that exist under the major Microsoft .graph module. And there's a bunch of them. When I took this screen grab, we were at version 193. We're now at 195. Looks like there was a couple of new ones added. I've got to kind of go poke around and get caught up to see what the latest has been added. So it is valuable if you're doing, development or actively, staying engaged with the latest and greatest to make sure that you keep this updated, because there's going to be new functionality that gets introduced. Now, if you look at some of these names, though, these are really long. They are. So how did they define these names? Well, there is a rhyme or reason to that. And before I address these really long ones, let me kind of get into the meat of it first. Before the dash is going to be, the equivalent of our API command. So, the get set. That's really going to be our verb. And, if you work with PowerShell, there's, it's a verb noun. And then after the dash, MG. And what that signifies is that this is a Microsoft Graph command. And all of them have MG. And that's so you as an admin know what you're actually interacting with. The balance of it is really the API path. So as the example that I have pulled up, here in the bottom, after the beta, device management, virtual endpoints, device images. And if we look at that, the equivalent PowerShell command, you got to get MG and then device management, virtual endpoint, device images. Now, the elephant in the room here, this giant guy. When I first discovered that, I about fell out of the chair because that's about the most unfriendly name I've ever seen for a commandlet. So I took that back to the feature PMs and the devs that actually own the space and said, hey, can we do something about that? Because it's a little long. And they came back and said, yeah, that's a bug. It shouldn't be that long. So for today, that name still exists, but that has been identified as a potential blocker for some folks, because I mean, it's so long I can't even read that. But yeah, this was just malformed. So, that is a bug, not a feature. Let's see, what do we got next? Oh, the GitHub repo. I'm gonna go ahead and a little demo, show what's in the repo to show you kind of how to take what we've put in there. I just did a new commit this morning, so I've got a new tool in here that I'm pretty stoked about. But the point of what we're trying to do with this repository is it's not so much to give you fully baked community tools that you can just go ahead and run with. Some of them you can get away with that, like the RTC, the WebRTC updater. I ended up writing that for a particular custom of ours that was having massive issues, and since it was already done, I figured why not share it out. So some things would be there, can be fully baked, but really the idea is to give folks a place to start. My experience with scripting has historically been I really don't know what I'm doing, but I know how to steal other people's code and make it work. So that's what I really want to do, is have examples across the board of all the functionalities and be able to demonstrate, here's how you get the data, and here's how you can parse that data, and then give everybody enough information that they can start putting together their own automations or solutions and whatnot. And so as the days go on, I'm going to keep adding more and more code to it, not on a particular cadence, but I'm really trying to, my goal, and I haven't met it yet, is about once a week, maybe once every two. It depends on what I'm working on. If it's something extensive, it might take a little bit. One thing I would ask, and this is not just me as a cat PM on the team, but all of our PMs, please give us feedback. We love it. Why? Because when you give us feedback, we catalog that feedback, and we use that feedback to justify what we're going to build next. So please stay engaged. If you're working with a Microsoft CXE individual, or even if you're just trying this on your own, there's feedback URLs. Let us know. The more that we know the use cases, what you're seeing, what would be really useful, that's only going to help us make this the solution better. I think the last real slide that I have here, I've got a couple of links. I'm not sure if we're going to share out the slide decks afterwards. If so, we can grab those. It's all very Googleable, if that's a word. To get those URLs that I had up earlier. There's a high-level setup of how to use the Graph PowerShell SDK, just a link to the Graph Explorer. And for me, that is enough slides. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the scripts I've put together and how they work. Let me go ahead and back out of that again, and let me minimize that one. And then here we are. Okay. So on our main branch, I now have 4 folders. And just to point out quickly, because I know it was brought up in the previous session, the WebRTC auto updater for proactive remediation. If you have cloud PCs and they've been around for a while, the WebRTC service does not auto update, and that's the whole point of using this. This absolutely can impact your team's performance. I've got all the instructions in there. There's your detection script, remediation script. What's really cool about this, though, is besides it not auto updating, the other thing that WebRTC doesn't do is, or what it does do, rather, it's the problem, is it kills all the team's process. So while you could absolutely go take an MSI, wrap it, and deploy it out, if you go ahead and deploy it as required, run now, everybody's team session is going to restart regardless of what they're doing. So my remediation script actually monitors user state and only actually does the installation if the user state is inactive or not logged on. So that way we're not interrupting the users. If you're not using proactive remediation, or you want to deploy it in other ways, there is a standalone functionality that you can use without the remediation. I know I'm getting sidetracked, so I'm just going to go ahead and step away from that. But this is a really cool tool. I'm very, very proud of the work that went into that one. The one that I just published today, where is that? Oh, Cloud PC usage. This has been an ask for a while. So we deployed X amount of Cloud PCs and we're paying X dollars a month. How do we know people are actually using it? It's a good question, because those licenses aren't cheap. So this script aims to give us some feedback on that, because as of right now, there isn't an in-console way to get that data. And so what this script is going to do, it's actually using two PowerShell modules. I'm using the Microsoft Graph SDK and Azure AD Preview. And I know most you can, if this, I'm not going to delve too much into the various intricacies, but what really it's going to do is it's going to load graphs so we can pull in all of the Cloud PCs and the UPNs. And then what it's going to do is to take that data and then compare it to the Azure AD logon audit logs. And there's a device subtype. So we can actually tell and get those individual logons of anything that begins with CPC dash. And that's really all I'm doing. And I'm just running a bunch of, for loops to find that data. But what it does is it then takes account. By default, it looks over 30 days. And we'll return how many logons. I actually need to update these images. These are a little out of date. But what it'll do is it'll give you the total logons over the span of the date provided, and it'll also give you the last logon. It doesn't do session duration. Nothing I can do about that one. But at least this gives you a way to gauge how much your users are using their Cloud PCs, so you can use that to justify if you really need to deploy a license to them or not. Lastly, the other pre-baked one, I did include the old language installer, which we used to use prior to the language and regional setting that's now in the MEM portal. Reason why I included that is, while the MEM portal is awesome and I like it, I think that is a very slick solution. What if you need two languages? Well, it only handles one. So under the spirit of these being examples, we have the script here and some basic guidance. If you need to deploy, secondary or tertiary languages, you can. The script is there. You can go pick it apart. It's pretty straightforward to figure it out. But that's why that's up here as well. That way, if you needed to deploy a secondary language, you don't have to go ahead and figure it out from scratch, because there are, other components that need to be installed along with just with a language pack, and it makes it easier. So that's why that's there. All right, enough prattling about the side projects. Currently, what I've got for example scripts, and these are today are only based off of the MS Graph. I do have scripts, and I've got those. I started working on ones that do the native API calls. What I'm doing here is I'm giving everybody a base script. And all they do is handle the authentication. Make sure the modules are installed, flag it if it's out of date, checks to see if there's already an active token, and connects into the service. So from right here, if you need something to go ahead and handle all of the auth and you just want to get to the meat and the fun stuff, you can go ahead and take those. And you can see there's like a little note, just add your code after here. And that's really all I've done too. So that's the base for all of my scripts. As a couple of examples, what I've got so far is we can list Cloud PCs by grace period to see if we do have grace systems within grace period, and I forget the name of the person that asked earlier, but yes, you could use this process, or you could use this script to go ahead and get the systems that are within a grace period, and then we could leverage the API call to remove the grace period, which will make the Cloud PC go away. So you could start with this, take the output, and then feed that into another function to go ahead and yank them. And that's kind of really the goal of all of this, is to give you guys a good starting point, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I've got scripts here to get the image, the systems by image, or by the OPNC, the Azure network. Now, or if it's on the hosted network, which is pretty slick, by provisioning policy, just really starting with some of the basics on how to get data and how to manipulate it. As I go on, my goal here is to have a script that works with every function. And so that way you've got validated content. If we wanted to look at systems as an example let's go ahead and pull by image. We can go over into raw. I'm just going to do a Control-A, Control-C, and go into PowerShell. Just going to go ahead and paste that in. Let's go ahead and run it, and let's see what we get here. So right there, yep, it went ahead and checked the version of graph. It came back. And we can see it listed out all the various images that are out there, but it then showed me my 3 Cloud PCs and what images they are. Useful stuff. If we want to start working along with graph, though, I'm following that same process. I need to get in here and clean up some of the functionality, do documentation. As you noticed, there's no commenting, and I really want to make sure that there's lots of comments to help folks. As of right now, these scripts are going to be interactive. If you need to go ahead and make them as automated, we can set up the app registration and the client secrets. But some of the kind of duplicating what I have up there now, but with graph. So as an example here, no, which one's that? Oh, that's. I thought I had one pulled up here. Let me just go ahead and snag one then. Oh, this PC experimental graph API. So then let's go ahead and let's go ahead and load that same image one. But this is actually being done with graph. And now I can go ahead and kick this off. And again, it's going to go ahead and make sure that your module is up to date. If it's installed, if it's not installed, it looks like I didn't actually have that installed on this Cloud PC, so it's pulling that in, kind of handy. And I had a token already from the previous run, so yeah, it looks like I need to. Yeah, it's still just a bit buggy yet, which is why I haven't released it. But point being though is we can still get that data, and that's the exact same data that came out prior. So hoping, if not before MMS, probably week after MMS. To have the actual graph-based ones up there. But if you're already familiar with graph, the docs are great. The APIs are well documented. And there's also community tools out there that will make graph calls much easier to work with. So if you don't like what I'm doing, there are plenty of other folks that are very much smarter than I am that have written some awesome community tools to make that easier as well. But please let me know what you think on the repository. If you want to go ahead and fork it, or you want to do a pull request, it's not just a me thing. I absolutely welcome the community, love the collaboration. So if this is something that seems of interest to you, please feel free to head and dig in. If you have questions, you can ping me on Twitter, at the Notorious DRR. But yeah, pretty fun stuff. So that's about what I got. Any other questions? Nope.
No, it doesn't seem there's any more questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for a great session, Donna. That was
You're
really,
welcome.
really good session. And I will try that Cloud PC users report later tonight, and I will give you my feedback for sure.
Please do.
That's a really good, script you have there. A lot of customers are eager to have that report, so definitely want to try that one out. Yeah. So we are out of time now. It's 8 p.m. CT. So if there are no other questions, I would like to say thank you for everyone to join us tonight. And we will be working on sharing the recording, the slides, and also the recording I got of the MMR features. I will post that in the meetup event. But have a great night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.